First of all, we very much appreciate your time, Christian. It is awesome to be connected today. We know that we can learn a lot from you, being an expert in business analytics. We appreciate that you're able to share your knowledge with us. Um, just for sharing a little bit before we start, Symbiosis is a platform, is a marketplace for connecting tech companies in the US with software agencies across Latin America that have available talent. Some of these agencies are specialized in front end, back end, blockchain, and also in business analytics. So it would be great if you're looking for developers that we can provide assistance on that. Today, we're talking about business analytics. Christian is an expert on that topic. So I would love to start with that. Christian, could you share a little bit more about yourself, about your experience, and a little bit about everything that contains business analytics nowadays?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. We've had this chat pending for quite some time now, so it's great to be able to finally link up. I'll give you all the short version of my story because we could talk for ages about it. But I am basically a Spanish major turned product geek. That's always how I present myself. I spent the majority of my 20s living in Argentina. And I fell into technology by pure chance with the excuse of just wanting to continue to live overseas. So I ended up getting an entry-level position at a web agency, small little web development company. And that's kind of where I started, dipping my toes in the water, if you will. Always in the space of like project management and gathering requirements and, looking at scope and things like that. And as my career kind of went on, where I found my footing and really found that what I enjoy most is in the business analytics space. So there's a ton of different roles you can play within that space, but a lot of times it's more leaning towards the business side, and it's essentially these roles where the people are dangerous on like both sides, dangerous enough to have conversations with the business folks, as well as be able to kind of translate those requirements to the technical team and help them, define their product, find product backlog, sprint planning, things of that nature. So that's the short version. I'm happy to talk about travel and other stuff related to the longer version of the story anytime. But yeah, that's kind of like the brief introduction that I always give everybody.
That's great. That's great, Christian. And I believe that it is amazing and how things change, right? And how if you're able to learn and continue to keep learning new things and then to develop into a business and then to develop into a career, that's always very, very important. So that's pretty great. For everyone that just joined us, the main idea for this event is to make a very interactive one. So please feel free to post your question on the Q&A part that is at the bottom part of the screen. We have the Q&A section. Please write your questions, and our colleague Eddie will be able to read it out loud for Christian to answer them. So Christian, let's get started with this. First of all, what is business analytics and how it all started?
Business analytics is, it's to me, it's like this huge overarching idea of essentially looking at, I guess, what you've got in the market already from a product standpoint, and then translating that to, how do you build out your product roadmap from there? I always say that the most important thing that leaders in technology and founders at companies need to keep in mind is after you get to like an MVP state where you've got something that's providing value in the market already, it's important to make decisions on about your product backlog and what you're going to develop based on like metrics and data and what your users are actually saying to you, rather than what you feel or think. Because as a founder, this has happened to all of us, or people who are like very vested in the product. It's like your baby, right? So it's just like you think like, oh, like I want this product to be able to do this, and this, and this, and like you'd be so proud of it, for being able to have, all the features that you dream of for the product. But the reality is you got to take a step back and be kind of like as objective as possible and really pay attention to, at the end of the day, what your users are saying to you and what your data is saying to you, because that's going to lead you down the path of taking like the most prudent decisions as far as your investment in development is concerned. At the end of the day, you got to invest capital in ongoing development. And you can, when you look at it from that standpoint, you're able to really think about, what's going to provide the most widespread net value for my user base, right? And this might be getting a little into the weeds, but I see so often where people, even projects that I've worked on previously, where they've got a ton of features piled on top of each other, but they're not necessarily catering to the majority of the user base, right? So it's one of those things where you really got to pay attention to what are people literally saying about the product. People go on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, they complain or they say, "Oh, this is great," or "I don't really need this feature." And then two, your data is going to tell you everything as well. So it's like kind of finding a balance between listening to the voice of the customer as well as just really looking into kind of those trends that you can find in anything that you're tracking as far as metrics are concerned.
Right. And that's pretty important because, as you mentioned, when you start a company, the first thing you do is like, I just need to sell more. I just need to reach out to more people to spread the word about the company. And sometimes, if this is the first time that we're doing it, we don't know what tools we can use in order to track that information, that extra valuable things that we need to perceive about our customers. So on that regard, what tools do you recommend? If we're just starting and we're just first-time founders that we're doing this for the first time, what tools do you recommend for getting into business analytics?
So I know there are a ton of tools out there on the market, but I think, let's say you have a web-based product, right, where you have customers that interact with some sort of portal that you've developed. A popular tool out there for measuring metrics as far as user behavior is concerned is definitely the Adobe Analytics tool, which is obviously part of the Adobe suite. You can look at things like where did the user put their mouse? Did they click? Why did they not click? Right, and so that'll help you determine like those little clues where you pay attention to all those things that are related to the user activity and the behavior. You can kind of at least give you a place of saying, okay, why did the person get this far in the process and then abandon? Is there a step that seems a little too confusing, or is the wording not clear enough, right? Another tool that I've used in the past, which is probably a little more economic than Adobe, is called Hotjar. So that'll also give you it'll do like a heat map of like what are the most popular or the most popular interaction points on your platform. Again, if you have like a website or a web-based application, you can look at kind of like these trends of what's the first thing that sticks out to the user, what's not so hot, and why, right? So I think when you can at least have a high level of where that behavior is happening, and you can look at those patterns. If the majority of the users are kind of repeating this behavior, that'll give you a pretty good sense of where to start and kind of show you where you need to dig into to find out more.
Okay. That's great. And during the early days of the company, do you believe it's wise to hire someone that is an expert on business analytics, or should the founder learn something about it, or what would be like the best approach for an early stage company?
For an early stage company, I don't know that I would say it's 100% required. The reason I say that is because a lot of companies, let's say you have a SaaS company, right, and they're looking to develop an MVP. The reality is you gotta keep your your investment and your development as lean as possible so you can get something out into the world, right? MVP is like how, what's going to deliver the most value with the least amount of resources required. So you don't want to be burning cash and capital way too fast, right? And most of the time you can get something that's bare bones functionality into the market for, not a whole bunch of money. I think in the longer term, when you're looking at product roadmap and sustainable product development, that's when these strategic positions of bringing in a business analyst would make more sense, because the other reality is, as a founder, when you want to grow the company, you've got to remove yourself more and more from the day-to-day operations. If you're investing capital into a development team, say you've got 2, 3, 4 developers, you're investing capital there, you might as well invest the extra bit to make sure that the person who is gathering and documenting your requirements does it in a way that allows the development team to get what their business needs out to the market, at least 80% with 80%, 90% accuracy the first time around, because that'll help you avoid like technical debt in the long run. Like I said, earlier, the business analysts, their job is to kind of, sit between both the main business stakeholders as well as the technical team. So in my experience, for example, it's I go and sit with the stakeholders, and we have these open conversations about what does the business need, and what are you hearing from the market, what are you seeing in the data, and then we break that down, right? So like a general idea, we break that down into epics, features, and user stories that we can then go and share with the development team. Those have to be very well documented. And as a founder or somebody who's leading the company, you don't really have the time to be, carrying out that activity, because you need to be spending the majority of your time on other strategic initiatives that are going to grow the company. So I think in the longer run, after you've gotten something that's, in the market and it's doing well, and you're looking to turn the corner, I think that's where you start to engage a business analyst to help you fill in that gap. Like I said, I think in the long run, it's going to help make your investment in the development team, have a greater return than if you're trying to, juggle a bunch of things all at the same time.
Okay. And that's great feedback, and it's a very valuable insight, because sometimes people get this buzzword, right? Like, use business analytics. That's the future of your company, and maybe it's not the right stage for you right now. Like you mentioned, you need to create the beginning, the base part of your company, and later on, as your company requires, then you can bring someone external to manage the business analytics, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because also, I mean, like, if the reality is, to me, is if your company is like really early stage, you probably won't really have much data to analyze anyway, right? So it's going to come after a time of like, maybe you've been in the market for 6 months, 12 months, then you've got, something that you can at least work with. You've got feedback that's coming back from users, you've got metrics that you've been collecting, and that's going to take some time to gather, right? For that to organically come through anyway. So to me, from an investment standpoint, bringing in a business analyst, from day one, I just don't see it as a prudent decision as far as like return on investment is concerned.
Right, 100%. Okay, and on that aspect, let's imagine that we already have 2 years in the market and the company is growing really, really fast, and you're generating a lot of information there. And then you hire a business analytics. In your experience, how do you merge that part of the business analytics with the product development roadmap? How does that work?
Great question. This is about, to me, in my experience, I think this just has to do a lot with ongoing education and just having these really candid conversations with founders, and the business stakeholders. I think there's a difference between MVP, like what's required for MVP and what's required for long-term product development, like in a sustainable way. At the beginning, you can afford to be really scrappy and pull resources and, do whatever you need to do to get something out into the world and make sure it's working and just provide some initial value up front. But when you think about a product that you want to last for 10, 15, 20 years, right? It's really wise to start to think about people who are solely dedicated to, helping putting these processes in place that are, and I know it's a buzzword, but, the Agile Scrum methodology, because those are the folks who are going to help you, as a business stakeholder. And a lot of times, some business stakeholders aren't, they're not as tech savvy, or they're not so familiar with like the long-term product development processes and what are the best practices. I think at the end of the day, somebody like me, what I try to do is I try to have these conversations with stakeholders so that they realize, are you investing your money in the best way possible? At the end of the day, development is a very significant investment. You want to be sure that over the course of 12 months, if you've got a bunch of stuff in your product backlog, you want to be prioritizing what's going to give you maximum return, as quickly as possible. And the people who are dedicated to doing that, business analysts, those are the ones who are going to be in there day to day, like having these conversations with you to say, okay, here's what we want to deliver in the next 12 to 18 months, right? What's going to, give us the most bang for our buck in the next, 6 to 12 months, right? Because everything takes time, right? You go from ideation to feature delivery. Maybe you've already worked through 8 to 12 sprints, right? That's a long time. That's a long time to be burning cash if at the end of the day you're not delivering what the market is actually asking for, right? So I think, how to merge the business and IT, that's something that I'm very passionate about and talk about all the time. Because you can't have the business without IT, and IT can't exist without the business either way. So it's kind of like this marriage of having these folks in the middle who basically act as the peacemakers.
Yeah.
That's the business analyst, right? That's the product team from the more functional standpoint, where it's like I said at the beginning, they're the folks who are they know enough on both sides of the house to be able to kind of carry things back and forth. So I think to merge business and the IT, it's not something that has a concrete stop. It's something that's constantly ongoing. There's constant conversations that need to be had, and it's just continuing education, like I said, because I've worked with clients in the past who they had a SaaS product. We did a bunch of work for them, rebuilding a lot of stuff, and they had never seen agile development at all, right? It was just a bunch of documentation piled up. It was we want to do all of this. I was like, okay, you can do all of this, but what's the most important right now, right?
Right.
What are your users saying? You want this, but is that something that one person asked for, or do you see it a trend that the majority is asked for? Okay, right. So we can build epics and features and user stories around that, and get into this cadence of, okay, I've gathered some requirements, I've documented them, I've shared them with the development team. The development team has given me a rough estimate on size of effort for the user stories, right? And based on that size, we can start to plan what our sprints are going to look like, what workload. Once you get that size and rough estimate of effort, that also helps a lot to kind of communicate complexity back to the stakeholders and give them an opportunity to assess, as far as, how complex is something to deliver. Okay, well, we can push that out further, and we can, push this up in priority. But I think to kind of round off the idea, and I know I kind of rambled for a little bit, but I think it has to do with kind of this constant, just having these candid conversations, right? Because it's never a one and done. There's never a full stop. And organizations grow, people come, people go. You got people coming from different industries with different experiences. So you're never going to be finished having these conversations between IT and the business, kind of merge it and get it working as best as you can.
Right, and I agree on that. I mean, it's a never-ending job, right? It is important that both parts are connected, that they are able to communicate with each other, because like you mentioned, they wouldn't exist without the other, right? So it is very important. So they get connected. I believe that we have a question from the
Yes,
audience.
we have a question from the audience, Mr. Dana. Business data can be useful for internal decision making and investor relations. What are some key metrics in those two verticals that early stage startups should be tracking?
Okay. Let me read that again. I just want to process it.
Thank you, Mr. Dana, for your question.
Okay. I think early stage startups should be tracking, and then again, I'm assuming where we're talking about like within the world of like SaaS products and digital products, right? I think one key metric that you've always got to be aware of is like your monthly active users. That's key for your retention rate, right? And that's, you know, like you said, Mr. Dana, that data can be very useful for internal decision making as well as for investor relationships. If that number is on a steady like increase, and you know that's something that I think you can take to conversations with your investors to say, you know, we've got this steady increase in users. It's you know it's slow and steady, but at the same time, company XYZ over there, who's our competitor, they've got more features. So we need, you know, an injection of capital to be able to ramp up development and keep our monthly active user metric steadily going up, right? That's I think a reality for a lot of these early stage companies. And if you guys think about what kind of happened this year with, I haven't been on it in a long time, but like if you look at Clubhouse, I think that's a perfect example, right?
Yeah.
Clubhouse, they were two founders, and I think they did most of the development on their own before they were able to, I think, raise capital and bring in more people. But you know, obviously there was a ton of hype around that, and so they had like kind of like hockey stick growth as far as monthly active users are concerned. But then what happens? Here comes Twitter Spaces. They've already got, you know, the infrastructure, the architecture, the team, the money to basically do the same thing in a shorter amount of time, right? So that's kind of, for me, that's a really key metric that you want to be keeping an eye on, because that'll, you know, startups, you got to deliver quickly or you die. That's essential. That's, you know, essentially, I think most people, you know, having an honest opinion would say that to you, right? Like speed to market is obviously so important. And for me, that's this year, that's one of the main examples that comes to mind. So I think monthly active users is definitely a key metric you want to keep in your eye.
Yeah, I believe that sometimes we are focused on the monthly recurring revenue only, right? But there are also other key metrics that we should be aware of, and more when we're talking with investors. I would like to go deeper on that end. You mentioned that this data analytics is important to track how the users are interacting with your product, right? Like how many users are you getting every month, and what's going on with their past 3 months or 6 months, how your company evolved from that point on. But it is also very helpful for something that you mentioned that is key, is this is the trends, right? Like what's going to happen in the near future and how we can sell that to the future potential investors that are interested in our company. So in your experience, Christian, what do you use, what tools do you use, or what methodologies do you use to find these trends and capture them into generating more business to your company?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. Like, and if you want to get like dive deeper into it, when you talk about, you know, what's going to happen or what's in the future, right? I think, you know, two key pillars, and there's a ton of different ways to analyze data, but there's two key pillars that you can kind of lean on when you look at your data analysis, kind of what's going to happen when you have these conversations with investors. You can look at, you can analyze your data and see, you know, what happened, how it happened, why it happened, right? So that's kind of like your main premise there. And then the other two key pillars that I really like is, you know, after you looked at, you know, those three questions, then you say, you know, like your how is like you have predictive analysis, which is what will happen, if I, let's go back to the example of we have users who get to a certain point in the process and they abandon, right? Why, right? So we start there. Then we have a predictive analysis that says, okay, if we were to improve this process somehow, this other thing would happen, right? So that's what's going to happen. Then we have the prescriptive analysis. The prescriptive analysis says, okay, so we figured out that XYZ would happen if we fix this other thing. How are we going to do that, right? So that's the actual implementation. So I think, as far as methodologies are concerned, it's just these are just exercises that you need to kind of sit down with and have with your team, because data by itself is just doesn't really mean anything unless you actually give it some meaning, right? And you prescribe something to it. So I think once you figure out like what happened and why it happened, then you need to go to the predictive analysis and say, here's what'll happen if we fix this, and the prescriptive analysis says this is how we're going to implement it. Once you figure it out, the predictive part of what you believe is likely to happen when you improve a process, that's something that you can also leverage when you go and have a conversation with an investor. Because an investor might come on the third or fourth round and say, hey, well, you've done this, this, and this. Your monthly active users are this. What's next? Say, okay, well, we've identified that this is something that we can improve upon, but to be able to deliver that quickly, we need that injection of capital, right? Now, I'm just making that up. Like every business is going to be different, but I think that's a legitimate, story that could play out when you have a conversation with an investor, right? Yeah. Think about like any like growth equity investor, like they want to put capital in, but they want to know what you're going to do with the money, right? So you obviously go with like a good problem, right? Quote unquote, where it's like we're doing well, but we need to fix this, and this. We need more capital to do it, right? So I think part of that is that predictive analysis and that predictive and prescriptive analysis, where you say, okay, here's what we think will happen if we are able to fix this. Mm-hmm. Part of the implementation is I need 10 more developers and I need more cash to do it. So real world, day-to-day business stuff, right? So when you have conversations with investors, I think that's something that you could take to that table and leverage when you're having those conversations.
Yeah, it will make you see more prepared for this, right? Like you understand your industry, the market you're in, and also with all the information that you recollected from the last few months, now you're able to predict what's going to happen in the near future, and you're prepared for that. And you just need the right amount of capital to reach to that point. Okay, yeah. That's very, very interesting. Eddie, we have another question.
Yes, from the Q&A box from Matthew. Have you integrated Google Analytics web tags coding into your web page? Turning on Google Analytics with a business account doesn't aggregate the same level depth of data as integrating the web tag code. And that's a question for Christian.
You were kind of choppy there, Eddie. Could you repeat?
It's in the Q&A button.
The connection was
Christian?
kind of choppy.
You can also open the Q&A button right in the bottom part of the screen next to the raise the hand.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you? Okay, I see it. Have you integrated Google Analytics web tag? Yeah. This is something that I've seen in the past. That's more. It definitely goes. So I'll read the question again for the rest of the audience. So it says, have you integrated Google Analytics web tags coding into your web pages? Turning on the Google Analytics with a business account, right? So Google Analytics with a business account is like, I think it's analytics.google.com. And I think it'll give you like some basic metrics of user behavior when they visit your website or whatever. But what Matthew says is it's not the same as actually having the tag embedded into your website or your product on the back end. That's very true. And I think again, this is probably closer to like what I was talking about, where some folks work with the Adobe Analytics tool. This is going to give you a much lower level of granularity as far as like what's actually happening when when somebody visits my webpage or they're using my product. Right? Think about, like, I'm sure we've all been on Amazon and like you've added something to your cart and you didn't buy, and then like magically the next day they're hitting you up saying, "Hey, don't forget about this item in
Yeah.
your cart." Right? A um, that's a deeper level of analytics than just um, the that's a deeper level of analytics than just Google at the page level. Just going to say, very basically, here's the interaction that this page, and this page had. Like, this is the amount of visitors that it had. I don't know if my
Right. Yeah, I believe that answers the questions. Christian, do you hear us well? Because I believe you're frozen. Okay. It seems like we're losing a little bit of the communication with Christian. To all the audience, if you want to ask questions, please, you can write it down in the Q&A button or the chat part of this conversation. We'll be able to read it out loud, share it with Christian so we can get an answer. This is more like an interactive event that we're looking for. And well, he will be joining back again in a couple of seconds. So I believe that this business analytics topic is very, very important and should be implemented to the companies when it's the right time, right? Because we are also founders at Symbiosis, and we start tracking this information at the beginning, but then we realize, as Christian mentioned, that we only have like 10 or 15 users, right? So there was no point of tracking that information. But now that we have 2 years in the market and we have raised capital, all the investors are asking for information. When we try to raise the seed round now, they are asking for the trends. Okay, what are you gonna do with the money? So you have to present this data, these numbers that are more solid. So I totally recommend that you invest time and resources on finding the right guy for your company that is able to handle this business analytics. So that's very, very important. Just for giving a little bit another advice from ourselves, Symbiosis is a platform, is a marketplace that is focused on connecting tech startups in the US with software agencies across Latin America that have available talent. So these developers will be assigned on a monthly basis, meaning that they will be able to work under your management and for as long as you require them. So this is a very convenient model that we're implementing. We have a lot of clients in the US. And please, if you want to ask any questions about this business analytics, feel free to send it here on the chat or via email. We will share this presentation with all of you to your emails. We have a recording, and also we will be able to share any other questions that you have with Christian, so he can answer them. We will also share Christian's information. We're sorry that he got disconnected, but he's the owner of an agency in Latin America that manage business analytics as their main core technology. And hey, Christian, you're back. You're back. Hey, Christian, do you hear us? Hey, Christian. Yeah, it seems like his connection is not working. But he's the owner of this company. So if you're looking to hire people on the business analytics areas and you need good talented resources, please feel free to let us know. Also, any questions that you might have. Christian, do you hear us now? I think that you're moving. It seems like as soon as I talk, he gets disconnected. Christian? Okay. Well, guys, we very much appreciate your time today. Please let us know if you have any questions. If you need more advice directly from Christian on any topic, we will connect you with him so we can get that covered. We very much appreciate your time today, guys. Hey, Christian, now you're back, right?
Yeah. I'm having, so it's a very rainy and windy day in Central Florida. So it's not.
Okay. No, it is great. It is great. I was talking with the rest of the audience about your company. If you could tell us a little bit more about your agency and how you guys are specialized on business analytics. If they have more questions on that, that would be great. And if they want to reach out to you, I was saying that we will share the recording of this event with all the attendees so they can review the information and they can also enter in contact with you. But if you could share more about your company and what kind of technologies are you specialized with.
Yeah, absolutely. So my company is called Piola Digital. We are a US-based company with operations in primarily in Colombia. So we provide IT staff augmentation and agile team services to companies based in the US, basically looking to flex your development arm. You can link with me. So first of all, you can go to the website at www.pioladigital.com. I'm going to put it in the chat. So that's where you can read a little more about everything that we've been up to, and then you can reach out to me at Christian Fox. Okay, so that's where you can give me a shout. I'm happy to hop on a call. See if there's any way we can support you in any of your product development initiatives. Like some of our core technologies that we work with are the most common these days, right? So React, a bunch of the JavaScript libraries. We've got folks working with Vue.js right now, Express, Redux, but the list goes on. But primarily within kind of like the most common tech stack that most companies are using these days.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. I could talk for ages, but I know everybody's got other stuff they could be doing.
No, it is great. It is great, Christian. And one last advice that you could share with the audience regarding implementing business analytics for their companies. One last thing that you would like to share with them.
Pay attention to the data. The data is going to tell you everything. Data doesn't lie. User feedback doesn't lie. And when you get to a point in which, as a founder or as somebody who's leading the company, you get to a point where you feel like you need to step away from the day-to-day operations of the actual product development and focus on strategic growth initiatives for the company. That's when it's probably the best time to start to look at bringing in a business analyst. That's going to be somebody who's going to help you look at all of your data and your trends and what your users are saying. Obviously, you provide that direction as far as what your vision is for the company, but finding that happy medium between what the vision is for the company, as far as the goals are concerned, and what the market is saying. That's going to be when it's probably the best time to think about like a 12 to 18 month roadmap, and bringing somebody who really is has that expertise about, okay, this is what our epics features and user stories should probably look like for the next 12 to 18 months, because it seems like it might seem like certain things are easy to deliver, but when you start to like really get into the thick of it, you see that certain initiatives can take anywhere between 4 to 6 sprints to deliver. That's when you really need to get a good grip on how you plan your sprints, and you help the development team to plan out the workload for each sprint accordingly.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, and that actually leads me to one last question that I have in mind here, and that's very, very important topic. When you mentioned that these guys are more the business analytics person that will get involved with your company are more aware of these trends, what set of tools, or I mean, like, what set of skills do these people have in order to be able to gather all this information and then to translate that into a plan to action, right? Like, okay, we're gonna do this and this and this. What kind of tools or skills do you believe someone has to have?
Yeah. So, and this is probably a whole nother session, but you could start with an activity called story mapping. Story mapping is essentially you sit down with somebody from the business side, right? Me as a business analyst or a product owner, sit down with somebody from the business side and say, okay, what do we really need to deliver in the next 12 months? And you start at the very top, and this is literally like on a whiteboard. There's also digital tools out there. One that I really recommend is Miro, Miro. There's also a board that you can use. It's called Mural, Mural. These are great tools that literally help you like draw out this top-down view, right? So you say, okay, for the next 12 months, we're working on this product initiative, right? And our epics are this, this, and this, and this. Below that are features. And then below the features are like the lowest levels of granularity for each user story. And they're like little sticky notes, right? They look like sticky notes on the screen. And then below that, you have a line. And then you say, okay, everything below this line is not part of the scope, but we want to include it at some point, right? So that's a skill that your business analyst should have. They should also be able to, extract the requirements from you as a stakeholder, in a sense where something I do is, I sit with somebody. I got a client right now he's got something. He's got a product, a SaaS product for like hyper targeted marketing, and he goes and he shows me this screen, and he goes, well, why does the screen look like that? Why did they develop this like that? And I'm like, okay, so what do you need here? Well, I need this button. Okay, you click it. Then what happens? Well, then it needs to do this. Okay, then what happens, right? So like most people aren't like as a business stakeholder, like you have this vision of what like you're the expert of the business, right? Of the market, of that vertical, whatever vertical you work in. So what has to happen, but the development team doesn't necessarily know. And the person who's the business analyst, whose job it is to come in and get those details from you, doesn't know as well, right? As a business analyst, my job is to pull everything out from you and break it down into these small bits of work of the development team. That's gonna be the summation of eventually, what's gonna solve your business problem or the problem for your end user. Right. So the business analyst should have that in their skill set as well. And then also that's on the business side of the house, right? Remember that I said that the business analysts, they're dangerous enough on both sides of the house, right? So after I've done all of that, now I need to go socialize all of this with Dev, right? I need to sit down with Dev and say, okay, here's what we got for the business. At a high level, right? What's our estimation of this work? And we're not talking about time. We estimate based on complexity. That's important. That's very important to communicate complexity to the business, not time. Because when you provide that transparency to the business as far as what the technical folks are saying, as far as how complex something is to deliver, that'll help them prioritize as well, right? Because that, okay, something that, and this is getting really into the weeds, right? Something that the dev team gives 3 story points, it's easier to deliver than something that they've given 21 story points, right? So if you're able to kind of share that estimation of complexity with the business, that'll help them as well, where they want to invest their IT spend, right? And help to plan the future sprints. So I think those are 3 key things that you want to see in a business analyst skill set, right? Being able to help you map out your stories visually. And then 2, being able to like really just dig into, okay, what do we need from a business standpoint, right? What happens when you get here? Okay, what's the next step in the process, right? And then you build user stories around that, right? And then you socialize all of that with Dev, and they help you kind of put the pieces together as far as how long eventually take to deliver, which will then give you, from a business standpoint, give you the opportunity to prioritize going forward as well.
That's very, very interesting. And I mean, like, it is important that we are aware of that process, right? Because sometimes it's like, okay, if the information is there, then you build your product roadmap and that's it, right? Like, no, it is a real internal process that requires time and requires someone that is able to communicate.
Exactly. And that, like I said, I think that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to have that chat whenever you're ready to.
That's great. I mean, like, it is very important, and we should address that in another event. I believe that it would be great to have you back. I believe that with this we covered the main topic of this conversation.
We have another question, a last question from Matthew from the Q&A box. I don't know, Christian, if you would like to read it.
Okay.
Yeah. It says, Christian, could you comment on segmenting customer profiles, i.e. a website visitor that does not have coding experience, but a vision / business model versus the technical customer who is more familiar with coding? How could they discover these segments and implement analytics to determine if it's worth integrating? Hold on, I want to read it. So are we talking about? So I just want to make sure I understand. Are we talking about like a user who's more or less technical savvy, Matthew? You can put that in chat or wherever for the Q&A.
Hello, Matthew. You want to turn on your microphone?
Oh, I think he's up on stage. Yeah.
Hello. How you doing?
Hey, Matthew, we can hear you. We're doing well, and you?
Good. Sunny in California, San Diego today.
Nice.
So I guess what I was trying to get at is, like, you could have two customer prospects and segments, like, just to be broad, that, a completely untechnical person, but, they're very business savvy. They maybe are an entrepreneur or whatever, and they have a vision in that business model versus someone who does have coding. They're able to put in, okay, I need Java, I need Go or C++ coders for this project to build out these things. So I feel like those are two completely different customer bases or funnels that you would have. So I guess my question is, and I'm curious about, is there a way, like, what analytics could you put in or integrate to determine if you're getting both, like, multiple customer segments, and then how could you use those analytics to basically figure out if you should allocate capital into, maybe having two website flow, paths?
Right. Yeah, that's a very good question. I believe that Christian just got disconnected to that, but I can jump in on from my perspective as a founder. And I believe that it is very important you prioritize the business in a certain way, right? Like, because at the end, it is important to have the IT part well covered and also working on the right things. But it is important that you first understand your business and the customer that you're targeting, and you focus exclusively in one segment, right? Like on a small niche that you have on that part. And if the business people are saying like, hey, we just realized that this customer is being more proactive and he's generating more revenue at this point, then we analyze all the data that segment is generating, and we start building this roadmap. And then, as Christian mentioned during the presentation, we try to merge that part, right? Like the business analytics guy, or someone, in this case, the business guy, should be able to translate that into a set of priorities. I mean, like, it is more important to develop this feature and this other feature, so the IT team can get like a guidance and start working on that product development. So I don't know if that answers the question, Matthew.
Yeah, no, it definitely grabs at it. Have you ever peeked through, like, PayPal for Business and their process when you start a PayPal business account?
No, we haven't. We have used Stripe. I don't know if it's similar to PayPal on that end.
So obviously they're behemoth, but their process flow is like, you have, it pops up, it's very visual. You just click boxes and they'll have like,
Yeah.
do you want to build something where you have no coding experience, like kind of like turnkey, or do you want us
Yeah.
to help you with just the backend APIs? And then you can, hire a developer to make a website, and it funnels those two segments. I just was curious if there's a way, like if there's analytics one, because you guys would be early stage, so you have your you have your burn rate, so you have to be very tactical with your spend. So if you could integrate analytics to determine the best way to allocate, that's what I was curious if Christian could comment on, and like what type of analytics would you use to determine how to do that?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand
You
that.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I do. And I believe that Christian just joined us. Christian, do you hear us? No, he's disconnected. So Matthew, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to share that question with him, because he will be able to provide a better answer regarding the analytics that should be used on that part. And then we can send you his response via email on that part.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. We appreciate your time and all the time from the attendees today. We'll be sharing this information shortly. And well, we hope that you enjoyed this conversation as we did. I believe that we'll learn a lot from Christian, and we'll be able to connect you with him if you're interested as well. Thank you all.